Well, good morning from suburban Jessup. I hope you're all doing fine. Been a while since we've done a video, imagine that. But today's video, we're going to take and we're going to do the basic forging on an anvil vulture or buzzard. Tom Willoughby started these, came up with these several years ago. I've lost track, but anyway, he came down to the Rocky Forge Blacksmith Guild meeting in West Point, Indiana, and he demonstrated them, and I attended that demo. And when I got home, I forged one. That was Saturday was a demo, and I had one completed by Tuesday, and I was quite happy with it. And I've been pretty much making them ever since. Well, I had an order for 3 of these this last week and a half, and I was posting pictures on Facebook on the progress, and a lot of people wanted to know if I could do a video or a how-to on how to do these. Well, I didn't want to do a video without Tom's permission, because like I said, Tom's the one that actually came up with these. And I called Tom and asked him if he'd mind if I did one, and he seemed to be real happy that I was going to do one. So anyway, with Tom's blessing, I'm going to show how to make an anvil vulture or buzzard. I call them buzzards. Mine are a little different than Tom's. Everybody has, different ways of doing things, and no two are the same. So anyway, that's what we're going to do today. So basically, this is all the tools that you need, hand tools and power hammer tools that you need to make one of these buzzards. We'll start with the fullers. The fullers here are just mild steel bar, and my rule of thumb is whatever size bar this is the bar that I use to do most of the fullering with. So this is 1.5 inches, so we'll use this 1.5 inch bar here. I believe this is 1.25 inches here, and I believe this is 1 inch. I've made about a 3/4. But most of the buzzards that I've made have been from between 1 inch and 1.5 inches. Maybe 1 9/16. I'm not going to sweat that 16th. But anyway, like I said, rule of thumb is the fuller that I use is the size of the parent stock that I'm making the buzzard out of. Okay. Then I've got a 1 inch piece of square with the corners rounded. And I've got a tool that fits in the bottom, on the bottom die of the KA. Usually I use it for making tongs, but this is my bottom fuller for the neck. This and this I use on the neck. Okay? Now that flatter there is actually, I'm going to use it for a hand tool. On these eyes, when you first start, this goes across, straight across, and I take fullers and I bevel that a little bit, and then I flatten the bevel out, and that's what I use to flatten the bevel and get the bevel nice and level. The other one, of course, is just a run-of-the-mill everyday flatter, power hammer flatter. Chisels, we have radius chisels. One's fairly large, one's small. I don't know the radius on them. I'll do some close-up pictures of them. But then I've got 2 different eye punches. And then I've got basically a center punch that I use for an eye punch. Up here I've got a square fuller, about 1 inch wide. I've got a rounded, probably 1/4 to 3/8 rounded fuller, about 1 inch wide. And then I've got the same fuller pretty much, only it's 3/4 inch wide that I use. And then I have three ball punches from small. Now this is probably a a 5/16 to 3/8. This is probably a half, and this is probably going from maybe a little over half to probably 5/8. I don't know. I don't measure them. I just, I make them by the punches and chisels are made from just regular coil spring. So anyway, that's a lowdown on the tooling. That's about all it takes. This is the parent stock. It's 1.5 inch round. This happens to be cold rolled because that's what my supplier had. I've used cold rolled, I've used hot rolled. I don't really, for this project, I don't see any difference in it. The length, somewhere between 12.5 and 14. I usually try to cut them 14. Sometimes I get down to where I've got a bar that's not 28 inches, so I'll fudge a little bit, but 12 to 12.5 is about as short as you want to go, especially on 1.5 inch stock. And I like to have a little extra. I'm thinking this one here. Yeah, this one here is actually 15. I gave myself an extra inch because I had an extra bit of bar and I wasn't going to cut it off. So this is what we're going to start with. And I weld a 1/2 inch piece of round, or a 1/2 inch piece of square stock to it. And the reason I use square is because that way I can kind of index my feel as I go, so that I can try to keep things square as I go. So that's pretty much everything we need to know to get started. So the first thing we're going to do, if you look at this guy, he's got his beak, he's got a step right here. So the first thing we're going to do on the end of this bar is we're going to forward it down about half the thickness. Okay, we're not going to go past but about half to start with. And as we forward that down, it'll want to spread out. We're only going to forward from one direction. Okay, we're going to use the step, forward your step on the KA. So as that starts to spread out, we don't want it to spread out real far. So every once in a while we're going to turn it 90 degrees and we're going to control that spread a little bit. Now we want it to spread a little, but we don't want it to spread a whole lot. So that's the first thing we're going to do. In order to try to contain the noise from the forge and the air compressors and just general shop noise, for the rest of the video, anytime we're doing the close-ups, we're going to kill the audio. So that's why there's going to be a lot of quiet here, and I'm not much on trying to find filler music, so I hope you can put up with the quiet. So now we have the step right here forged. That isolates the mass for the beak right here. So the next step is, we're not going to completely taper it, but we're going to start to taper for the beak. We're not going to do the final taper till a few more steps down, but right now we're going to take it, we're going to heat it back up, and we're going to start tapering the beak this way and tapering it this way. Now the other thing is, if you haven't noticed, I'm not real big on measurements because I just more or less do it by eye. Even the first one I didn't take measurements, I just kind of guessed where things was at. But we'll do a reverse measurement here as we go. Since this thing started out at 14 or at 15, basically, our first shoulder looks to be about probably 1.25 inches back from the start, because we started at 15. So to this shoulder here, I've got 13 3/4. So roughly 1.25 inches is what we went back to, how far back we went when we did this shoulder, this step. So 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, you know. If you want a longer beak, go a little longer. Just be careful, because remember, you're going to take a lot of mass, and you're going to fold it down, and then you're going to taper it. So if you think, well, I'm going to have at least 3 inches for the beak, you're going to end up with a beak. Well, it's going to be a big beak, okay? But anyway, this step is 1.25 inches. So what we're going to do next, like I said, is we're going to take this and we're going to taper it this way and this way. So now if you look at it, I've got the beak, I'm not going to touch it because it's hot. I've got the beak tapered this way. I've got it tapered this way a little bit, but it's nowhere close to done, okay? We just wanted to get the general taper of it, or the general shape. So what we're going to do now, we're going to put it back in the fire, and then we're going to start with just our square fuller. We're going to come back here. If you look on the neck, you'll see that the neck is pretty much down to the bottom of the head. Okay? It's not up in the center, it's not at the top, it's pretty much down to the bottom. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up, we're going to go back, oh, I don't know, an inch or so, maybe a little bit wider than our fuller. And we're going to set that down. Okay? And we're going to drive that down, which will keep that neck at the bottom of the bar. We're going to drive it down, and we're going to make it, we're going to make it about 2 bars wide. Okay, so we're going to move that bar back and forth, but we're only going to go down about 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 inch if we go that far. And then, that's where this tool comes into play. Because then, we want to forward it down here, right here, and we want it to be pretty much centered. So this will be on the bottom and this will be on the top, and that's how we'll keep that centered. When we go back, beak up, I guess we'll use that as a reference point. Then we'll go back to the single here. And for right now, we're gonna forward it down to about probably 3/4 square, give or take, maybe an inch square. But anyway, we're going to forward it down square. Okay. The reason for that being, we're not going to take it around yet. We're not going to do all that, because when we forward that down, that gives us a way to hold it in the vise to carve the face on the Buzzard. Now, if you take a look at it, it's still hot. It's real warm, but I'm not going to cool it down and waste time having to heat it back up. We've got our neck forward down to, oh, I don't know, let's take a look here. We're right between 1 inch and 3/4. Okay, we've kept it flat on the back or on the bottom. Okay, we've got the sides and we've got the top of the head isolated. So that's as far as we're going to go with that right now. That'll lock in the vise real good when we go to carve the head. So what we're going to do now, before we carve the head, is we're going to go ahead and we're going to move back on the bar, and we're going to curve. We're going to forward this depression here to separate his chest and his belly. Okay? So, now, here's the thing you need to remember. So far, we've done our forwarding from the top and the two sides. So we're going to take our 1.5 inch round fuller, we're going to turn it over, and we're going to come down, oh I don't know, it's a matter of opinion. We're probably going to come down about 1.5 inches with the bottom facing straight up, and we're going to forward that down. And we're going to go probably close to half, maybe not completely half, but probably pretty close to half. And that'll isolate, like I said, what that'll do, now remember there's weld in here, but what that'll do is that'll isolate the chest from the belly. So here we are. We've got our beak going, we've got our head isolated, we've got our neck isolated, and now we have our chest and our belly separated. Now the other thing you'll notice when I got done forwarding that depression between the chest and the belly, it was curved pretty good. So I took it and set it back on the power hammer and took a flatter, and I flattened it back out, straightened it back out so it's not curved. The straighter you can keep it, the better off you are. Don't worry about marks back here. Don't worry about getting some flat spots up here, because everything from that head down is going to be covered with weld anyway. So, you know, you don't want to get it too flat, but like I said, if you happen to flatten out a little bit when you're trying to get things straight, don't worry about it. So the next thing we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to come down. We're going to isolate the mass between his belly and his tail feathers and make a shelf to weld his feet to. So now when I do that, sometimes I'll use a round one, use the same round one I used for this, but the last, well, I don't know, 4 or 5 went back to the 1 inch square and used it to forward first and then back, and we're not going to completely forward the tail feathers, we're just going to isolate the mass and get ready to where when we're ready for that point we can forge the tail feathers. So that's what we're going to do next. So at this point, we put our step in it with the 1-inch square bar, and we kind of tapered it with the 1-inch square bar forward. And then once we got it wide enough to fit underneath the dies in the baudry, we moved it over the baudry and we flattened it out. Now it's still not as flat as it's going to be when we go to put the tail feathers on it, but it's pretty close. The only thing we got to do is we got to take that step out right there on this back side. We don't want that step, but all we got to do is put it back on the KA and take the square forward and hit it a couple times, and it'll take that step right out of it. That's what we've got so far. Now what we're going to do next, since we're this far, is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this 1-inch round forward, and we're going to get in here, and we're going to spread this across this way and spread the tail feathers a little bit. While we've got it here, we got it hot. So now if you look at the bar, we have his beak, his head, his neck, we have his chest, his belly, we have his tail feathers started. Like I said, we took it forward, we spread that out. Okay. So the next step now, before we carve the face, is we're going to head and we're going to draw this beak out under the baudry and thin it down some and get our beak more or less the way we want it. Because once we do the face and we put the 2 nostrils in there, we really don't want to forge this anymore. So we're going to forge this down now. So there he is. Pretty much all the rough forging's pretty much done. The only thing we need to do now is we got to carve the face, which to me is the fun part. That's the best part of the whole project. But we got to carve the face. Then after we get the face carved, then we've got to finish the neck by forwarding it down some more, rounding it up, about a 3/8 to 1/2 inch, probably more closer to 1/2 inch neck round. and then most of the foraging will be done. So we're pretty close to done, but right now we're going to no more than 8 these days. We're going to take a break. I'm going to go eat lunch.